Welcome to the Respectful Divorce Podcast. If you're considering a divorce, it's important to know that you have options for how you divorce. On the Respectful Divorce Podcast, we explore those options and provide advice from divorce professionals. I'm your host today, Tim Crouch, and we're talking with members of the Collaborative Professionals of Washington about getting a divorce in Washington and the upcoming Divorce with Respect Week 2026. Joining us today are Lucia Levias with the Dubois Levias Law Group in Seattle and Sarah Sanis with the Sanis Law Group in Paulsbo, Washington. Thank you both for joining us today.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's begin just kind of talking, first of all, a little bit about what it's like to get a divorce in Washington. What can someone expect that the divorce process is going to be like?
So to get a divorce in Washington, one party has to file a petition for divorce. And in the county where I practice, which is King County, the court will then issue a case schedule, and they will tell you, hey, you've got to wait at least 90 days to finalize your divorce, but we're going to give you 11 months to get the divorce completely finalized with all of the negotiations. So that includes, what is your parenting plan going to look like? What is your child support going to look like? How are you going to divide your assets and liabilities? So it's a process that the court oversees. And there's a period of discovery where both attorneys and the parties are sharing financial information, and they may hire their own experts to look into what the different assets are or figure out what their client's best position is in terms of their division of assets. They may bring into the case a parenting investigation to meet with both parents and recommend to the court what the parenting plan should be. And then ultimately, every case is required to attempt mediation in a 8-hour day mediation setup. And then if the case doesn't settle in mediation, that 11-month trial date will get triggered, and the case may have to end up in trial.
And if it's in that whole process, what are the emotional kinds of roller coaster things that you're experiencing in a litigated divorce?
So just to share a little bit about me, I've been practicing family law for almost 20 years. And the first 15 of that, I was doing traditional litigation, family law, and divorces. In the past 5 years, I've been doing collaborative. So it's been really great for me to see the differences between the two. I think for both processes, the parties are starting out facing a really devastating time in their life. They are looking at some of the most critical parts of their life and worried about what's going to happen to their children, what's going to happen to their money, what's going to happen to their homes. And for most people, it is a very scary time with a lot of uncertainty. One of the things that in a traditional divorce process that people are most scared of is a judge, somebody that they don't know that's not part of their family, making a decision about the most important things in their lives, like their children, their money, and their home. So basically, how do they present their case the best to a stranger about how that's going to be resolved? And that is incredibly stressful. And the threat of their spouse taking them to court is on a lot of our clients' minds, and it can add to the stress of the process.
Sarah, in your experience, how can you avoid some of those things that Lucia was just talking about?
I think it's really important for people when they're in that state of crisis, right from the very beginning, to kind of feel confident enough in their counsel that they can trust them and that they can kind of slow down and realize that this is going to be a multi-step process. Things aren't going to happen very fast, but that they're going to be protected and safe as we go through it. It doesn't need to be a rush. It needs to be well thought out so that all the big concerns can be addressed and met.
Yeah, and the collaborative divorce process allows you to kind of go at your own pace, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's nice because it can go a lot faster than litigation, and it can also go a lot slower and more methodically if needed. So it's a better fit for a lot of people.
Yeah. And Lucia, part of what works in collaborative is ultimately it's the couple that make the decisions, and it's more specifically tailored for their family, right?
Exactly. So it's an interest-based process as opposed to a process that is dictated by what a court would do or what a judge would do. So the family has an opportunity to look at what are the interests that they want to protect. How do they want to resolve this? We share the information about the law, so they have that information, but it's not the primary focus of how they end up resolving their disputes. They can do things that are way outside of what a judge or a court may do, but is best for their family and their circumstances, their children, because we honor each family's uniqueness in the process, I think, much more in a collaborative than in a traditional.
Yeah. And you, as you said a moment ago, you practiced the traditional part of this until about 5 years ago when you moved to collaborative. What attracted you to the collaborative divorce process?
It was really kind of the timing of what was happening in the world. It was the pandemic. And it was also a lot of social unrest that was happening around that time. And my recognition that it seemed like we were getting worse at being able to resolve disputes among ourselves as people. We were sort of just becoming, there was a lot more conflict I was noticing in the world. And I thought, what can I do in my profession, in my little part of the world, to contribute to a higher standard of dispute resolution? How can I be part of something that allows people to figure out how to resolve their disputes on their own with the assistance of professionals, but not necessarily running to court? And so I had taken the training about 5 years before that on collaborative divorce, but just really hadn't gotten intentional about bringing it into my practice. So I pulled that book off the shelf and dusted it off and thought, let me take a look at this and see if I can really focus on it and bring that attention to it. I've been able to bring that into my practice now, and it's been extremely rewarding.
Yeah. Sarah, what attracted you to the collaborative divorce process?
Well, I'd been doing litigation for a number of years and actually did both litigated divorces and collaborative divorces for probably another 10 years. After I'd only been doing litigation. And I think the biggest thing that was just so motivating to me was that oftentimes when we were working in the traditional litigated model, we would start off with these couples that, though they had decided to get a divorce, they still had a lot of things that they had in common. They still agreed on a lot of things. They had a lot of shared values. And just the process of a litigated divorce is designed to kind of tear people apart. You have to sort of say terrible things that you maybe really don't want to say and maybe don't need to say in a collaborative process, because it's forward looking rather than backward looking. And so I worked with all these families who at the beginning of their litigated divorce, they would be getting along fairly well, but they needed help with some issues. And then by the end of the divorce, um, they couldn't stand each other. And we had taken a relationship that was still fairly functioning and made it even worse and destroyed it in many cases. And that was just so upsetting to me and frustrating. And, I really felt just terrible for their children, especially to like have to go through that. And especially when it could be prevented by picking a different process.
Now, in your practice, how have you seen it make a difference with your clients?
I believe that they have an opportunity to kind of sit back and actually have a chance to hear each other without feeling so threatened. And sometimes that can take a lot of work to get to, but they're able to, really get to the point where they can understand where their spouse is coming from. And I think that oftentimes helps in them reaching an agreement. Whereas, the type of communication you have in litigation doesn't allow for that because it's like the game of telephone. You're not really talking to your spouse. You're talking to your attorney, who is then talking to their attorney, who is then talking to the other spouse, and then it has to go back and forth. And so much gets lost in the middle. And, attorneys add their own positional nature to it. So you really lose that in litigation as opposed to collaborative.
Yeah. And Lucia, one of the big differences in the collaborative process is you have neutral professionals who bring unique skills to the process, right?
Yeah, most of our collaborative teams have a financial neutral, and then there's also a coach, a divorce coach that joins the team. And so the role of those professionals is to provide information to the parties without having any particular bias towards one or the other. So what typically happens in traditional is each lawyer would get their own financial person, for example, and would come up with, here's the best scenario for my client. This is meet all of their needs. It would get them where they want to be. And then the other attorney be working with a financial specialist on how to get their client exactly where that client wants to be. And of course, you end up with two very different reports. When you have one financial neutral, that person is looking out for the whole family and taking all the financial information and placing it out in front of everybody and say, okay, here's what we have. And how do we want to divide it that meets everybody's needs instead of it being just focused on one person's needs or the other person's needs? And similarly with the coach is there to help the parties through this process because there are still emotions. I mean, even if you do it collaboratively, there are still sticking points. There's things that can, bring up some hard feelings. And so they help us through this process, but they're also really there to help with the parenting issues that can come up and help develop a parenting plan. And so that really helps move the process forward and then gives them, our coaches have a master's in social work. And so they have a specialty around developing these parenting plans, and they can really provide expert advice to the clients in a neutral way.
Yeah. And I want to kind of build off of that neutral question because these neutrals, Sarah, are, people who work for both sides, whereas each side has their own attorney that really is representing their interest at that point, and the neutrals play a really important role because they're neutral, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And there's a lot of issues when couples are getting a divorce that don't need to be positional, and they're oftentimes just really involving logistics. Like for example, on the coach end, trying to figure out a parenting plan. You don't need a positional advocate to discuss what the holiday schedule is going to be. You really need, a therapist to walk through and talk about the logistics about what's going to work for each family. And that's, always a very unique situation with every divorcing couple with children is, holidays. But when you have positional attorneys discussing holidays, it's overkill. It's too much, and it's not as effective, and it becomes very expensive. And the same thing is with the coach. I mean, the financial advisor. They are oftentimes just doing the busy work of gathering all of the financial information that is just basic and people don't really need to argue about. They're agreeing that, hey, we're going to share all our information. That person is doing the due diligence of gathering it, and we don't need to be positional about most of that information. So it's good to find neutral perspectives whenever possible in a divorce.
Yeah. And so how is it different as a divorce attorney to be a collaborative divorce attorney versus a litigated divorce attorney? How is your work different, Sarah?
It's like a fundamental paradigm change, honestly, from doing litigation because kind of in the background of every conversation you have when you're working with another litigation attorney is like, well, if my client doesn't get what they want, we're just going to go to court. So there's this constant threat that you're going to be in court, and it's going to be maybe at a time that's not convenient. It's going to be at a time when people aren't going to have time to prepare necessarily. It's going to be very stressful, and it's really going to be expensive. And so it kind of is just throwing this weapon into the negotiation process that's very threatening, I think, to most people, because they know that if they don't, give in on a particular issue or find a way to compromise, they're going to have this big, stressful, and expensive threat that's like holding that's behind all agreements. And it makes people agree to things that maybe don't work. And they only agree because of that threat. And then in the end, there's, long-term problems because they've agreed to things that, aren't right.
Yeah. And Lucia, one of the key components of all of that really is that you are committed to staying out of court, and that does reshape the work, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So every participant, including the professionals, signed something called a participation agreement at the beginning of the collaborative process. And that contract basically says we agree that we're not going to go to court. We're going to work in good faith with full transparency, and settle this case without having to go to court. And when you take court off the table, it really changes the conversation. Now we're not talking about things that may strategically work better for us in court. We're not sort of looking for maybe an error that the other person made that you can take advantage of. All of a sudden, it's like we don't have to worry about this scary thing that could happen, and we can really negotiate on our own terms. It completely changes the conversation.
So we are doing this podcast in advance of Divorce with Respect Week. During Divorce with Respect Week, there's an opportunity to really talk with collaborative professionals about the divorce process and to talk individually with you all. What can somebody expect to learn when they have that initial kind of consultation with either one of you? And Lucia, we'll let you go first, but Sarah will have the same question for you.
Yeah, so I'm happy to jump on the phone with anybody who'd like to learn a little bit more about the collaborative process. I will also talk about what it would be like if you're going through a traditional process, because I think that's an important reference point for people to see what those differences are. So when I talk to people about collaborative divorce, I'm going to be talking to them a little bit more about the process, and we're not going to be getting into sort of the solution. As a litigator, you're normally starting with, how do we get to that solution? I'm going to be listening more for, are the two of you going to be comfortable being in a room together and sharing openly? Is anybody going to need some additional support to make sure that they can express their concerns? I'm going to be really making sure that you understand what the collaborative process is and that it's the right process for you.
Yeah. And Sarah, that initial kind of consultation with you, what will that be like?
Similar to Lucia, I really believe that for every divorcing couple, the key is from the beginning to find the process that is the best fit for them. And there's several processes to choose from. Collaborative is one of them, and it, is great for the couples that it works great for. And so we want to make sure that is what they want, that they understand the collaborative process, that they understand what their other options are, and that they're, stepping into it understanding what's expected of them. And also, making sure that, identifying the issues that they're going to have to, discuss and agree to in the end, and making sure that's something that they understand that, there isn't going to be somebody at the end that tells them what to do, that they need to figure it out with their spouse.
Sarah Saines and Lucia Levias, thank you for joining us on the Respectful Divorce podcast today. If someone wants to reach you, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Sarah?
I have an email that they can email me on my website, or they can call my office phone number, which is also on my website.
And your website is what?
sarahsanaslaw.com.
And Lucia, best way to get in touch with you?
Similarly, just go to my website, which is duboislaw.net, DUBOIS law.net, and you can contact me there through the email, or you can call my firm and get a consultation set up.
All right. Thank you both for being with us today.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will have all of that information, contact information, in the show notes. For those of you watching us online, thank you for watching the Respectful Divorce podcast. This important programming note that Divorce with Respect Week is March 1st through March 8th. During Divorce with Respect Week, you can talk with lawyers, divorce coaches, and divorce financial experts for free to learn more about the divorce process and your options. Simply go to divorcewithrespectweek.com to find professionals near you. Divorce with Respect Week, March 1st through 8th. And that website, once again, divorcewithrespectweek.com. I'm Tim Crouch for the Respectful Divorce Podcast, reminding you that collaborative divorce is a better way to untie the knot.